Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It's 9:45. It's Tuesday. Beautiful day today. So yeah. Hope everyone's doing good. I always miss when I'm away from my computer to do Film Fanatic shows. I was staying down at my girlfriend's house. I usually when I go there, I kind of decompress. I don't bring my computer, and I don't end up doing any videos usually there. But and it's nice to take breaks. But I definitely miss the burn. I get a burning sensation when I can't make a video. It's really funny because I really enjoy it, and typically I do a video every day, and I usually upload every other day or every day. Things happen, schedule wise, or I get a late start or what have you, and and then sometimes I will put up videos as premieres, kind of mixing things up. So yeah, I always want to give a big shout out to some of the awesome folks that have been supporting this page and always put out really cool comments and make some recommendations, film recommendations. That's what it's all about. So super cool, super fun. I just started doing some promotion for some Film Fanatic shows. I'm sorry, for some Quantum shows that are coming up. We have a show coming up next week at Hot Hill Tavern, which is a cool spot. We've played there actually quite a few times, and it's funny. We had a lot of I don't know. We had a weird thing happen there once, but things smoothed over, and I realized I wasn't the best at how I handled the situation. But it was probably about 2 years ago or so. For my band Quantum, I usually do all the booking and handling all that kind of stuff, scheduling stuff and trying to book the gigs and trying to make it all work, and it's pretty easy as far as that stuff goes because it's just me and my friend Mike who's been playing bass in the band for it's hard to believe we've been a band for 10 years, and so he's been in the band since the beginning, and he's just one of my closest friends, and so it's just the two of us. And occasionally I'll do shows where he can't make it. We Once in a while when that happens, where he can't make it, I will usually just still do the show. But I always obviously try to get him on board. It's I had a gig recently, was it last week, where it was the first time I did a Quantum show without him, and I don't know, it's a totally different kind of vibe, and I have to like wear a different hat when I'm doing that because usually when we're playing live, he plays live bass and has a big kind of jazz background and uses a lot of effects pedals. So a lot of times we're playing off of each other. So without him there, it's a totally different kind of thing, and having him there is always the best. But we're kind of at a point now where like if that happens, it's no big deal. I'll still do the show. It used to be in the past like if we both couldn't do it, depending on what it was, we wouldn't do it. But for the most part, for the bigger more important shows, more shows that are more like a concert or a bigger event, we'll usually do them always together and try to always make that a priority. But as far as Hot Hill Tavern was that situation, we a couple of years ago I had booked a gig there, and it was a summertime gig, and we went there. And Hot Hill Tavern is in Thomaston. It used to be a place called Billy's Tavern, which had a long history. And that place at one point was a big, well, it was like a mecca for live music. That place used to be packed to the rafters with people. All the big bands that were in Maine played there, and it was just it was an awesome spot. And then it closed, and a bunch of owners, different places tried to revive that venue or that space. It never really worked, but now it's been Hot Hill Tavern for a few years now, and they seem to know what they're doing and have a pretty good, you know, solid fan base to keep them going, and they definitely get the locals. So anyway, we played our first show there, and I kind of booked it, like I normally do, and we went there, and about 20 minutes or so after we were done setting up, the owner had come over to me and said, "Well, basically, we might ask you guys to pull back a little bit, or to actually start a little bit later, because there's a big party coming in, and that's going to take up a lot of room and what have you." So we were like, "Yeah, sure." And basically, the entire, I don't know, it felt like every sports team that was, at the high school all came there, and it was like packed with all these, teenagers. No, and none of them were of drinking age, and it was just packed, like just to the rafters, and it was just like really kind of overwhelming, but it was great for them. And we ended up pushing our set back, or pushing our set up. We started a little bit, half hour, 45 minutes later than we were going to. And then we started playing, and the place was packed, but people didn't really, I don't know, we didn't, a few people I think liked us, but generally I didn't think we connected with the audience at all. Like, people were just kind of like, I don't know what, they were like, "What is this weird music?" That was kind of my reaction, and I was like, "Oh, that's fine. That happens. You win some, you lose some." And I was like, "Okay, But overall, it was okay. It was pretty fun, and we played our set. There were a lot of people there, and there were a few people that were into it, and we got done. But overall, like, the whole thing felt awkward. And then I had booked, I think, 2 or 3 gigs there, and this was the first of one of them. And the owner and the booking agent for the club really liked our music. I sent them some stuff, so they were into it. And then we basically finished out the show, packed up and left, and we got paid. And then about 2 or 3 days later, I got a message from the owner saying that she was going to cancel our other gigs. We had like 2 other dates there, and she was going to cancel her other gigs, and basically said that it's because people basically didn't like our music, and they were complaining about our music, saying it was too weird or this or that, and that it was too much for them. So it was very weird. And the owner was like, "I really thought you guys were great. I liked your music, but my people were complaining and saying that they didn't like our music." And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." So I didn't expect that. And so the gigs got canceled, and I kind of got a little bit aggravated at the situation, and I kind of reacted towards her about, "Well, you know, that's kind of lame that you cancel our gigs," and I overreacted, and I felt a little bad at how I handled the situation. So, and then that was it. And then that was it. We had our gigs canceled. We never played there again. And then about a year later, a friend who we've done some shows with, he does these, AC Davis does these showcases, and asked us if we wanted to be a part of it. It was going to be part of a show where we were going to be opening up for his band, Oov, and a couple other bands. And they asked us if we wanted to do it. And I said, "Yeah, we'd love to do it, but," and I explained to him the whole situation and how they canceled our gigs, and they apparently, a lot of the people there hated our music, and it was kind of a disaster that way. And he talked with the owner, and then he said, "Well, it's cool, everything's fine, you're welcome back here." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So we went and played, and it went, that part of it was gone. Like, people seemed to like it, and it was a cool vibe, and I had seen the owner around that time, and I kind of apologized to her, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry if I came across as a little bit of a dick." So about it, and because I took it a little bit too hard to heart, and I realized I was maybe a little unprofessional, and I kind of apologized, and she was totally cool. And since then, we've played there, I don't know, four times. And we usually play there in these like showcase shows that AC Davis has been putting together. So it's worked out. And so we have another one there coming up next week. So that will be fun. And we're going to be playing with my friend Ronnie and Halsey, who are just awesome, amazing musicians. They both have electronic groups, and we're going to be sharing the bill. And then we also have, some other shows coming up. We're going to be doing another show at Opera House Video, and Ronnie's going to be playing at with us at that, and that's going to be an interesting kind of configuration. I got some cool plans, I think, for how that will work. And then we also have another gig coming up where we're going to be playing. June is Pride Month, so we're going to be playing at a Pride Festival in Rockland that's coming up, and we're going to be playing on the Sunday. So that's going to be cool. And then we have another, a bigger gig at a big party on Allsboro, and that's going to be like an overnight show. So yeah, we got some cool things coming up. But anyway, today's show is on. I just uploaded. I just watched both movies back to back, and I just finished the second video. I just uploaded it, and I did coverage, two videos on Bad Lieutenant. The first one from the '90s, starring Harvey Keitel, directed by Abel Ferrara, one of my favorite directors. One of the most disturbing and just fucked up movies ever, I think, ever made. And I also did the reimagining or remake that was directed by Werner Herzog, and it came out in the 2000s, starring Nicolas Cage. And I love that movie. I think that movie is just awesome. I had only seen that movie once, but it's a killer movie. It's a really great remake. It's a really great reimagining, if you will. And I just finished uploading that video, so check that out. So yeah, and then today's show is going to be on, well, all things Frankenstein. I thought of this idea last night because yesterday I saw a trailer for the new Frankenstein movie that is coming out. And I wanted to talk about that trailer and various Frankenstein movies and my view on, kind of the whole mythology, the book, Mary Shelley's book. So this will be interesting. So what started this idea was yesterday or the day before, I saw the new trailer for the new Guillermo del Toro Frankenstein movie, starring Oscar Isaac and Mia Goth. And I'm a massive Mia Goth fan. Oscar Isaac is awesome too, but I'm especially a huge Mia Goth fan. I feel like she can't do anything wrong. I've never seen her in a bad movie, and I think she's an incredible actress. She's versatile. She can do anything. She's like helped to, her long collaborative movies that she's done with Ty West, and she's produced films. She's produced some of those films. She's, put her own money. She's helped write them. I mean, she's so creative, and everything I've seen her in, even outside of that, she's just fabulous. Oscar Isaac, I love too. But I love Guillermo del Toro. I do think sometimes he's, I kind of think he's, I don't know. I feel like sometimes he's not very consistent. Sometimes as a director, when he's on, he's fucking on. I mean, I think Pan's Labyrinth is a complete masterpiece. The Devil's Backbone is amazing, but there's some films of his not a massive fan of. Like Pacific Rim and Crimson Tide. I think was another film that he did, which was like a haunted house horror film. Lady in the Water is pretty good. But and then he did the Hellboy films, which the first one was pretty good. The second one wasn't very good, I don't think at all. He also did the second Blade film, which I really wasn't a fan of. And so he's, I don't know, I don't think he's that consistent as a director. It's weird. I kind of feel like Guillermo del Toro, I mean, in a lot of ways, when he's on because those movies that I first mentioned are just masterpieces, especially Pan's Labyrinth. I mean, that movie is just jaw dropping. And Devil's Backbone is amazing. And so when he's on, he's on. But like, and then he did another film called Kronos, which is like, it's okay. I do want to revisit that movie. It's a vampire movie, but it's definitely like an art house. It's got an art house vibe, but it's a vampire movie. But then it doesn't really feel like a vampire movie. I don't know. It's that movie gets really hyped up as this kind of masterpiece. I think it's a little overrated. It's good, but I don't know. But I kind of feel like there's weird parallels between Guillermo del Toro and Peter Jackson. Like Peter Jackson has made, you know, incredible films. His early like grindhouse kind of exploitation movies that he, was it Basket Case, and then even like first three Lord of the Rings films, and he's made a couple other films that are really great. But he's also made a lot of clunkers, that are not very good. And so, not a very consistent career, I don't think. But both of those directors are critically acclaimed as being master filmmakers, and they are master filmmakers. But for me, it's like when I think of a director that gets put on such a high pedestal and gets all of this acclaim and accolades like constantly, like whatever they do, for me, it's like it's not about the name; it's about the quality. And I know that's all subjective, but you know, I don't put them on the same pedestal as I do with like, Scorsese or even Tarantino or Robert Eggers, where they just have, or Denis Villeneuve, where for my money, like those directors are just top notch. Like everything they've done, everything they touch is gold. They don't seem to do anything wrong. And and the thing is like looking at the filmmakers kind of their track record, like their films and just high quality or consistent quality, being able to bounce back and forth with different genres and all these things. And I don't really feel like Guillermo has that consistency, but again, it's all subjective. But overall, I think when he's on, he's fucking on, and he can be an incredible director. Um, and I remember hearing about that he was going to make a modern take or re, it's a period piece from what I gather and from what I saw from the trailer. But he was going to make a modern kind of contemporary version of Frankenstein. And I watched the trailer and I saw that Oscar Isaac is in it and who I believe plays Dr. Frankenstein, and Mia Goth is in it. And I watched the trailer last night or yesterday for it, and I was blown away by it. I just thought uh, it's a period piece. The whole world looked just absolutely incredible. The monster Frankenstein's monster looked just absolutely intense and just menacing. Oscar Isaac looked amazing. Like it just looked like fucking awesome. And but again, it's a trailer, so you have to kind of like take it with a grain of salt because I felt the same way about Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus, and that movie was a big dumpster fire. So the trailer looked fantastic, but when you get into the movie, you're like, once they start bringing back dead actors, no, thank you. So but the trailer itself looked absolutely amazing. So I, you know, got me really really excited. I was curious to see what this would be like, and what this could be. But when I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, I'm officially on board. And I believe, well, it's a Netflix production, but I believe it's going to get an actual theatrical release. I think that's the case. I don't think it's going to be just a streaming film. I think it's going to be in the theaters, which I hope and pray to God that it is, because if it's just a streaming film, I'm just like, I that's going to so turn me off to even wanting to see it. But I do believe initially from what I heard, what Frankenstein was, the original intention was that it was going to be a streaming film, but I think because of, you know, the eagerness for people to see this movie, there's been a high demand that it's going to get a theatrical release, and I do believe that, I don't know, a few months ago I saw that it was determined that they were going to put it out in theaters, but it is a Netflix original, so that to me is, it's mixed. I think that's good and bad. I mean, so just because, Netflix has done some good original films and TV shows. Obviously, Mindhunter. David Fincher's amazing series, which was announced, which was announced just recently that they're going to be bringing that show back, which is pretty awesome. They did the Hellraiser reboot or reimagining a couple of years ago, which was awesome. But because it's Netflix, they are not physically releasing the movie. You can't get it on Blu-ray or a physical media version of it, which is total bullshit. And that's the thing that Netflix always does. So I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird time that we live in many ways, but in regards to films and distribution and how we see them, and will it get, I mean, you never thought in a million years that would be a thing where you'd see a trailer or hear about a movie, and then the trailer comes out, and then there's like, oh wait, it might not actually even go into the theater. It might just essentially be just on a streaming platform. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's like, what? But that's how that's the world. That's part of the reality of the world that we live in now. So after I saw the trailer again, I was blown away by it, and it just looks spectacular, and I definitely want to see it. It's coming out in November, but it made me think about, okay, Frankenstein movies, and I've done a few shows where I will talk about my anticipation for upcoming movies, and I've done a couple of shows on trailers. I did one on Romulus, Alien Romulus, and I've done a few other shows about that. I generally don't do trailer review shows or those kinds of things, but sometimes things are really, really exciting, or that I find really exciting, and I'm really anticipating it. So I'll do that. And after I saw the trailer, I started thinking about, and I'm always thinking of new ideas for this channel and different ways of talking about movies. So I started thinking about, okay, kind of the history of Frankenstein. I mean, and one of my favorite novels of all time is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I love that whole, concept that book brings about, the god Prometheus, gaining the power of, gaining the power of a man great being able to create the power of a god, and to rise up from the darkness and adversity. I love that whole kind of concept, and I am also a huge fan of the character. I think Frankenstein is one of the most iconic characters ever, and you know the horror canon. And the Prometheus theme, especially the novel, is so different than anything else. I feel like the again it deals with like Prometheus, a person attaining the power of a god, and deals obviously with the whole concept around Dr. Frankenstein creating this monster who has these you know uncanny powers, and basically being able to control his own destiny. And the book, it takes a real deep kind of exploration into all of those kinds of ideas and concepts. And there's never really been anything that really resembles, like, and again, there's a thousand Frankenstein movies or Frankenstein themed movies, but nothing really comes close to the book. I don't think at all. I mean, and I really was thinking like, okay, what good Frankenstein movies are there? What are some of the movies out there that are like, is there a definitive Frankenstein movie? And as much as I love Boris Karloff and the classic Universal monster movie, which is is without a doubt a classic film, I realized in thinking about these things, I was like, there really isn't a definitive Frankenstein movie. Like there really isn't, you know, a movie that really does the character complete and utter justice. And also the masterful novel by Mary Shelley. It never there's never been a movie that where you feel like, okay, they got it right. This is like a definitive version. Because I think, in the canon of, well, monster movies, or you know take for instance the classic monster, the Universal monster movies. There's been examples of that. I think when it comes to, well, and I was thinking of, okay, Dracula. You take the classic Bram Stoker novel, and all of the vampire movies, which is a different thing, but then also the thousands of Dracula films that have come out, and I feel like there's so many great Dracula films, like and vampires and movies about vampirism are more popular than any other theme regarded in regards to the Universal monsters. Um, but I think with Dracula, there definitely is like examples of that where there's like a definitive movie. I think like for me, my favorite Dracula film for many many years was Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula with Gary Oldman. Um, I still hold that movie. That movie's a complete and utter masterpiece, and that is just an incredible example of where it feels like, okay, this is like the definitive version. But that being said, it wasn't until Robert Eggers directed Nosferatu, which for me took knocked Francis Ford Coppola's version to number two. I think Robert Eggers' Nosferatu is the definitive version of Dracula, and I feel like like that is a true you know representation of this classic horror character. And I think it's also happened in the werewolf films. I'm a my favorite creatures or monster films are werewolf movies. I like, as much as I love Dracula films and vampire movies and zombie movies and slashers. When it comes to like the more monster based films, I'm all about the werewolf film and the whole werewolf aesthetic. And I feel like obviously there is nowhere near as many werewolf films as there are Dracula films, or especially vampire films, which is the definitely the biggest genre or subgenre in the world of horror. But I think there's been definitive werewolf movies, like where, American Werewolf in London. My favorite werewolf movie of all time is The Howling. Like to me, that's the definitive werewolf film. I also love all of the old school Paul Naschy films a lot. He's and then also I think Creature from the Black Lagoon, the original film, to me is one of my all-time favorite movies of all time, and to me that's like the definitive version of that character. And then I think another Universal monster, the Invisible Man. There's been tons of versions of that as well. throughout the years, but I feel the one that the Lee Winnell's Invisible Man that came out a few years back, I feel like that's the definitive version of that film. And I think that like that's like it lines up with all those other things that I'm talking about. Like there's in each of these respective genres and monster films, particularly the Universal monsters. I feel like the Invisible Man, Lee Winnell's version is also a definitive version of that character. I don't think that there is when it comes to the Mummy. I love the Boris Karloff version of that. I think that that movie is incredible. It's a masterpiece, and I also feel like the Frankenstein, the original or the first two Frankenstein films, are just incredible. But as far as a movie that is a modern kind of contemporary version of it, where it's just like um, just really contemporary and is a true representation of that. I don't think that there is a definitive mummy movie, really. That there's been a ton of mummy films that have been made. There's been all kinds of great kind of exploitation movies involving that character that are just awesome. But I don't think there's anything on par with those other films or genres. Werewolf, with that, say, The Howling, or Lee Winnell's The Invisible Man, the original Creature from the Black Lagoon, or Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, or Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. To me, there's not a definitive um, mummy film, and then also, I don't think there is. That's I don't. I think the same. The case is the same for Frankenstein. I don't think that there is a really great, just all around solid, true representation of that classic monster. There again, there's so many. You got all of the great Hammer films that came out in the '60s and '70s. There's a whole bunch of them with Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, that are great. Those movies are amazing. I love those movies. There's a bunch of Roger Corman Frankenstein movies. There's a whole slew of them. I really love Frankenstein versus Dracula versus Frankenstein, which is a super uber low budget exploitation movie. I love that movie to fucking death, and I kind of almost think that that might be my favorite Frankenstein version, even though it's so fucking terrible and cheesy. It's just amazing. And the probably the most popular, the most talked about throughout the years is Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, starring Robert De Niro. But that movie, I don't know. That movie is not very good. I never really liked that movie. It had all. It's one of those films that you feel, should have been perfect. But, you know, it- you know, you have Kenneth Branagh who directed the film and also stars in it as Dr. Frankenstein. Robert De Niro plays the monster. Helena Bonham Carter's also in it. An amazing cast. It's a period piece, but the film is so like, I don't know, like it's so overly like melodramatic and it just kind of it's just a little bit silly with how they try to use the melodrama of of the story, and it's a little bit too heavy-handed. It takes itself a little too seriously. I don't know. I don't really. I think there's things about that film that are good, but I just feel like overall that movie misses the mark. So, and I don't think it's a good representation of the monster. I prefer Boris Karloff's version over that film way more, and even against a lot of the kind of lower budget exploitation movies that have come out over the years. As far as Frankenstein movies. So, yeah, that was when I saw the trailer for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, it spurred a lot of thoughts around the monster, and you're talking about a character that's been around for almost 100 years, more over 100 years or so, and one of my favorite monsters of all time. And I remember as a kid, like my favorite thing to do when I was a little kid for Halloween was to dress up like Frankenstein. And I remember I discovered the book, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I remember reading it in high school, and it was one of the first kind of horror books I ever read. It's more of a gothic horror, but I remember being one of the first books I ever read in regards to horror. At first it was I discovered as far as literary things, like Edgar Allan Poe was overall my first introduction to horror. And then I remember shortly after I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and then after that, a few years after that, I read Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then that was what kind of started it. So the character is a character I love to death, and the feeling that I got when I watched this trailer was, wow, this could be an event. This could be something special. This could be what Robert Eggers did for Dracula with Nosferatu. Like this could be what Coppola did with Dracula. This could be what American Werewolf was or is to the genre of the werewolf film, or those kinds of things. So, and I know when I'm thinking about the way I'm explaining it, or as far as the werewolf movie, you could say too there isn't a definitive version of the werewolf. When it comes to the character of Lon Chaney's, the original, which is a masterpiece too, the classic Universal monster movie. But so I know it's a little bit of a different thing, but for me, I still regard those movies as so definitive in the genre that it kind of encapsulates all of that. But anyway, that was my feeling when I first saw the trailer. Afterwards, was like, wow, this might be what we need, as far as a definitive version. But again, the skeptical side of my brain is, you know, and why I get cautious around it is, you know, I do believe I've read interviews with Guillermo del Toro where, you know, he's talked about basically wanting to make this movie, like, you know, for a very very long time, and this was like a monumental thing for him to do, and that can be really good and it can be not so good. It was the case also with Robert Eggers when he directed Nosferatu, which originally, when he was a kid, he directed a play version of that, and that's more or less what got him noticed. And he had been trying to make that movie for years, and it just never really worked. And then, but then he finally got a chance to actually make it, and it's a masterpiece. And when I said there's weird parallels, for me at least, between Guillermo del Toro and Peter Jackson, that was the case when Peter Jackson directed King Kong, which came out. King Kong came out, I think it was a few years after he directed Return of the King, the third of the Lord of the Rings films, which is, those three films are just fucking spectacular, and Return of the King is just amazing. And I think it was a few years after that he directed King Kong. That was his first movie after doing, these incredibly ambitious films, back to back. And he directed a big budget version of King Kong. And again, it was that same kind of thing where he talked about in a lot of interviews at the time that this was a movie that he's always he's been wanting to make since he was like 6 years old. And he finally got a chance to do it. He had enough clout and he had all the money in the world to make it. And King Kong, and it stars, I can't remember who stars in it. Right on the tip of my tongue. But I think that movie sucks. It totally sucks. And total misstep and a kind of a disaster. So you got to, somebody who's sitting on something for so long, and then when they actually make it, it might not be very good. So I don't know. We'll see. But generally, I was like, I'm really excited to see this film, and I think we could be in for something of where this could be the definitive version of the film. But we will see. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.